So welcome, our beloved visionary leader, Paul. We appreciate your consistent solidarity. And as always at SETC, we begin all things by acknowledging our creator, acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Paul, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
So much, Victor. It's such an honor to be here with you. I really appreciate the invitation. So who am I? I'm Paul Taylor. I am the son of Bernadine Taylor and the grandson of Maisie Baker and the great-grandson of Rebecca Thompson. And, I acknowledge those women, brilliant Black women, because they are a huge part of who I am. They've informed who I am. They've informed how I lead. So a lot of the things that I feel like I've been held up for, people congratulate me for. Not only have they been done alongside many, many colleagues, but they've also been inspired by the teachings and the examples that I've seen Black women and Black women in my family lead with. So I think that's when I think about my leadership, that's where I begin. And I've been fortunate enough to, have worked at, I think four nonprofit organizations as the executive director, a couple in Vancouver, a couple in Toronto. Most recently, I was the executive director of FoodShare Toronto. And for quite a while, I've been teaching at Simon Fraser University, a course on fundraising, and a couple courses on leadership.
Incredible. Your journey is inspiring, and I appreciate your candor and that acknowledgement of the matriarchy and matrilineal aspects of your family lineage. That's beautiful. Thank you. So my next question is, what inspires you about your work? What has you passionate and curious right now?
Oh, what has me passionate and curious? I think what inspires me is really that, my mother, and one of the things I'm grateful for is that she raised an optimist. And she told me that if I believed something needed to change, that I need to get started and roll out my sleeves and work to change it. So that's just always what I need to believe. So for me, what is inspiring is, although we see suffering, we see harm, we see some of which is imposed by governments, some of which imposed by organizations. I believe all of that can change, but I think we all need to be dreaming in color and not give up on a big dream for what our lives can be and what our communities can be. So that's the kind of thing that has me inspired.
Ashe. Well, that sounds like a name of a new consultant from Optimists Who Dream in Color. You know what I mean? That's like an advisory service right there. A t-shirt or something. You know what I mean?
I
Optimists
like it.
Dream in Color.
might be more appropriate than evenings and weekends.
You know what I mean? Listen.
Yeah.
I love it. So what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And how are you and your colleagues working to overcome some of these barriers and challenges?
Okay. One big barrier is, I think the sector has been conditioned, or folks leading within the sector have been conditioned to reach for, performative type responses that really lack substance sometimes, and aren't doing the deep work that needs to sometimes happen within organizations, which is acknowledging the harm that's been done and actually thinking through what it means, what restitution means. So a lot of organizations, one of the things that I'm struggling with is a lot of organizations are wanting to, they're approaching us, they're wanting to collaborate on go forward approaches. But I think a big part of that work has to be the truth telling and the acknowledgement, and some restitution. So that's one thing that I feel organizations aren't always willing to grapple with. We've been working with a few that are, which has felt really good. But a big challenge for me is that organizational leaders have been conditioned to kind of compete with one another, reach for the, and not all, of course, but reach for some of the kind of performative type responses to really structural issues. So I think there's a real opportunity for us all to think about how some of the oppressive organizing principles that affect our work, how they affect each of us, how they affect our teams, how they affect our organizations, and how they affect us differently. And what needs to be done to actually move forward in a good way. So that's work. I'm actually also, maybe it's because I'm that optimist, but I'm also excited about that work. It's hard work, but it's, when there are groups that come to us that are willing to do that work, it excites me. When groups are engage us and want to start talking to their teams about their experience. One of the things that's become really important for us is having those organizations, before we start talking to their colleagues, having those organizations make it really clear what their commitment is to their colleagues when we open up to have these kinds of conversations. People have been through engagement sessions, they've shared painful experiences, and they haven't seen anything done. They've seen reports collect dust. So, for us, it's been really about trying to cement those commitments that organizations have to their communities, including their staff teams and their volunteers, before going out and asking people a bunch of questions, so that we can remind folks or share that commitment before they start sharing.
Shay, I couldn't agree more. The performative actors and institutions sometimes in our community that have done harm, whether intentionally or unintentionally, sometimes they do this virtual signaling thing, and sometimes make commitments, usually to consultants or advisory groups, to solve a problem that is much deeper than a report or a set of key informant interviews that potentially be shelved or no one could speak of because of a non-disclosure agreement, So I couldn't agree more. And yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in terms of that truth telling and truth seeking. So I give thanks for your candor and your consistent leadership. So my next question is, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work?
Key priority, making sure that I'm centering rest and joy. I will do work. I'll always have work to always have things to work on. But for me, the key priority is making sure with anything that I'm doing, I think about my ancestors and what they would have hoped for me. And I know they would have hoped for me to continue the struggle, and for me to be thinking about being an ancestor one day and open doors and leave those doors open for folks to come after me. But also, I think one thing that gets lost is that our ancestors would actually also want us to go outside and play. They want us to eat delicious food. They want us to, enjoy time in community. Like, that's a huge part of what they were fighting for and what we all continue to fight for. So for me, a priority has to be to respect their sacrifices and ensure that I'm making time and space to enjoy the things that are afforded to me, in large part thanks to their sacrifices and their commitment to thinking about folks like me coming down the pipe.
Ashe, ashe, ashe. So how do you feel about the future of philanthropy, the nonprofit and charitable sectors in Canada?
Maybe sometimes optimistic, and maybe this is sometimes a little bit less optimistic. And I think part of the reason, maybe I'll start with why I'm a little bit pessimistic. And I think it's because of how deeply embedded things like white supremacy, capitalism, ableism, patriarchy, how those things profoundly affect the sector. I see it all the time, a number of ableist policies, it's omnipresent. So I think we really need to be ensuring that we're dealing with those things and recognizing and honestly recognizing the impact that those things and how insidious those things have been, those organizing principles have been on how we do the work that we do. But I'm not seeing all organizations. The last organization I worked at, loved it, had a great time with incredible colleagues. And I remember when I first got there, there was a real reluctance to acknowledge to say white supremacy, to acknowledge white supremacy. Well, I don't have that reluctance, and I'm certainly not. I try my best not to be held back by white fragility. So, for me, it was important to ensure that the folks that I was working with, particularly those on the board, understood how white supremacy was impacting all of our work. Yeah, so I think that's a big one. We've got to tease it out. We've got to look at the ways, challenging white supremacy is not about diversity potlucks, is not about, those sorts of performative things. It's about actually looking at where are people sitting in your organization, who's paid the most, who's paid the least? What's the relationship between those paid the most and the least? Is there a ratio? Is it Black and brown folks, Black and brown women that are at the bottom of the pay grid? And why is that? Those are the kinds of difficult questions that the sector has to grapple with if we're going to come out of this moment in time in a much better way, in a way that really allows us to walk together in a good way.
Ashe. So what is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
I think success looks differently for all of us. I think we engage in this work for different reasons. I can say for me, success is about, as someone who grew up with poverty and grew up navigating poverty and recognizing those systems and how harmful those systems can be and what messaging that tells people. For me, success is about changing systems, changing expectations, people feeling like they can push back on harmful systems and actually seeing some success. Because like I say, for me, I think all of the things that we've been convinced are inevitable, all of them, most of them are changeable. So for me, success is when we're working together to change those things.
That's incredible. Thank you.
So I would say, that's why I do what I do. It's about seizing those opportunities to collaborate with people to reduce the harm that the sector does, increase our ambition and our efficacy.
Ashe. So my last question, my beloved colleague, do you have any closing thoughts or a call to action for our listeners and our viewers?
Just one. I just want to thank you, for the work that you do and the ways that you from the other roles that I've been in, have thoughtfully reached out, thoughtfully looked to ask if there were things that you could be doing to support the work that I was involved in. I think that's had a profound impact on me, and I know you're doing the same with others. I know you're lifting up the work of others, especially those whose work isn't always seen and celebrated. And I think about members of my family whose work wasn't seen, wasn't celebrated. They weren't compensated for that work. But it took, others to say, hey, wait a minute, we've got to acknowledge the labor, the heavy lifting that folks in our community are doing. So I am deeply appreciative to you for the work that you do and your commitment to community. It's appreciated and it's deeply inspiring. So that's my call to action, my final words. Thank you.
Merci, papa, my beloved colleague. And as always at SETC, we close by acknowledging our creator. We close by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders, the community stalwarts, whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Paul, for all that you do for so many. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, my friend. Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.